By now, you've probably seen my video about why we need a consistent, repeatable boxing scoring system. So let's dive right in. Awarding rounds based only on aggression or only on clean punching is like judging gymnastics only on the running, but not on the quality of the skills or the landing. Judging based on only a portion of expectations would never be acceptable in other subjectively judged sports, but it happens with boxing fans and judges all the time. This needs to change. Now let's take a moment to just get this out of the way. You cannot effectively score a boxing match while watching it for entertainment. There is just too much going on and too many factors to consider. In fact, I really feel for judges trying to do a complete job of this in real time. You need to watch it over and over, pausing, focusing on one scoring aspect at a time, and taking good notes. This system is less subjective, but not totally objective. Although I've heard about several companies using AI-based camera systems to get closer to full automation, which is very exciting. If any of you guys are watching, feel free to contact me for an interview sometime. I would love that. So that being said, what are the 4 criteria by which boxing judges should be scoring? Well, we'll name them in order of importance because the available literature talks about order of importance. The most important aspect is clean punching, meaning how many punches are landed clearly on the head or torso and around. The second most important is effective aggression. I like to measure, was the boxer aggressive in the first place? And if so, was it effective? Meaning how aggressive that fighter is in pressing the action and landing shots. If they're not aggressive, they can't be effectively aggressive. Third most important is ring generalship, and that talks about how well the fighter controls the pace and the tone of the round. And I like judging those two things separately. And then the least important, but still very important, is defense. And that's how well the fighter counters the aggressiveness of the other fighter with a variety of different techniques, including the high guard, ducking, bobbing and weaving, parrying, blocking, footwork, and even clinching when necessary. So now that we know the 4 criteria, let's have a look at what a template might look like that we can put together to capture all of these things, and then let the template do all the calculation for us so there's no feelings or subjectivity about what you think your eyes are seeing, but instead a calculated result that is determined the same way every time. So the first thing we'll notice in this template is I just capture a bunch of information about the event: who was the original winner, who was the original loser, the date, the location, who the referee and the 3 judges were, and then when I type in the names of all those people in one place, it'll fill them out in all the other places in the template for me automatically. As you'll see, I've put the 4 criteria in order of importance. So first I captured clean punching. I break it down to clean punches to the head versus the body. If one boxer's better to the head and the other one's better to the body, equal points can go to both of them in that particular category. Now, if one of them dominates more to the head than the other does to the body, we should take that into account as well. Then effective aggression. As mentioned earlier, I determined whether the boxer was aggressive in the first place, and if so, whether that aggression was effective. And we'll determine that for both fighters. Then we come to ring generalship. We look at how they control the action and how they control the tone. So, for example, in Beterbiev versus Bivol recently, there were rounds where I thought one fighter controlled the action while the other controlled the tone in the same round. So we have to capture those various aspects. Then we look at defense and all the different kinds of defense I mentioned earlier, and I average all those out into one defensive score. So it's not like defense has 7 times the weight as the other categories. It does not. Defense actually has a slightly smaller weighting than the other categories. That being said, let's have a look at how we weight these categories, given that we know that there is an order of importance. So if we have a look here at a sample weighting, we have 4 categories, and if they were equally weighted, they would weigh 25% each of the total 100% of judging the round. Well, in this case, I've bumped clean punching up by 5% to 30% and bumped defense down to 20%. And then I had an equal distribution from bottom to top. So 20% of the performance in that round attributed to defense, 23.3 to ring generalship, 26.7 to effective aggression, and 30% to clean punching. Looking at this particular sample scoring where we gave a fighter 9 points for clean punching, 9 for effective aggression, 10 for ring generalship, and 10 for defense, that normally would average out, if there weren't weighting considerations, to 9.5. However, when we use formulas to determine what the weighted score would be, you see it's a 9.433. And then moving back to our scoring sheet, we can type in that example for both fighters to see what happens in column P, where it compares the aggregate score for the whole round in all of these aspects in one fighter versus another. For each of the judging categories, you'll see that the default value is 0, and it's expecting to add values as you go through the template and fill it out. Each dropdown has the ability to pick a 10, 9, or 8. So typically in each category, one boxer would do better than the other by a 10 to 9 margin. If they happen to do better than them by a wide margin, I would pick a 10 to 8 margin. And now we'll talk about how all of that gets aggregated across or calculated to the final value. And so if we look at column P, where it's averaging out a composite or aggregate performance for that boxer across all of these areas in that round, you'll see that it's taking each category and multiplying by the weight of that category in our lookup tab. So we have, for example, clean punching. It will take what the boxer accomplished scoring-wise for clean punching in that round and multiply by 30%, because clean punching is worth 30% of the total score. It will take effective aggression and multiply by 26.7%, and so forth. And the reason we have this lookup table is that you can change your weighting if you need to, for whatever reason, to reallocate weights to each category, and it'll automatically apply to everywhere in your scoring template. You won't have to go change it in multiple different places. Then, of course, we need to consider knockdown. So if we type in one knockdown for one fighter, and to be clear, that is the fighter being knocked down, not the one knocking down the other, you'll see what my score would be for that round for each of the fighters. Then what I like to do is compare that to what each of the 3 judges said as well, so we can get a good comparison on how far off we think the judges were from what they would have come to if they had used a standard technique like this, or if they had had even the time to use a standard technique like this. We then scroll all the way down to the bottom of the template, where it adds together all the different rounds, and you get an aggregate score or a total score for the whole fight for each of the 2 fighters. I track the running score between rounds, and then the total score at the end of the fight for my system versus the 3 judges. And then, of course, if we scroll over to the right, we see areas to add in copious notes for the 4 different judging criteria, so that we can have evidence for why we picked one versus the other in those particular categories. So this is my system, love it or hate it, but if you hate it, just do me a favor and come up with your own standard system that accounts for everything that a boxer's expected to be judged on, and use your same system every time. That's all I ask. Let's not pick and choose which portions of a boxer's performance speak to us the most and give them rounds and give them the fight based on that. I'm really excited to walk through my first fight with you, implementing this template and talking about whether I agree or disagree with the judge's decision on that fight, and that's going to be Artur Beterbiev in his win over Dmitry Bivol recently. I'm looking forward to it, and we'll see you then.